when Julian and Kali and I agreed that we would host this workshop here, there was one person's name that came to our mind very quickly that we would love to invite as a keynote speaker. It's Carliss Baldwin. She doesn't need any introduction. Many of us have read her book, Design Rules, Volume 1, and I was told that Volume 2 is coming soon. So after 24 years, now we can reread Volume 1 again in preparation of Volume 2. So, when we were writing that paper, her work was exceptionally influential. The paper HBR article she wrote, The Age of Modularity, and then, of course, Design Rules, and several subsequent papers she worked on open source projects and mirroring hypothesis and so on. So, her work has influenced many scholars in different fields, in strategy, design science, and SIG DITE, and of course, her earlier career, she said, finance and options. So without much ado, please join me welcoming Carliss as our keynote speaker, first keynote speaker.
I'm so delighted to be here, my first time in Cleveland. And I want to thank the wonderful hosts, Youngjin, Yanis, Kala, Christina, whom I've met, and also TC and Akil, who were so helpful. And TC holds the drink slips, so. And I was really happy that Youngjin ended with two ideas, methods and theory, because my talk is about methods and theory, and not empirical methods. So, and I apologize for typos. These slides were put together they were put together and then they were taken apart and then they were put together again. I am sort of a fellow traveler of this community. I keep my eye on it, but I'm not really in it. So I'm so happy to be here and encourage you. And I'm because of this talk, I've been reading a lot in the last. So Design Rules went finally to the printer about a month ago. So I can't touch it, which is a good thing, because I've already found things I'd like to change. But in preparation for this talk, which is my first post-Design Rules talk, I've been reading your literature and learning a lot. So this is my imperfect take on where my concerns and your concerns might overlap. So how technology shapes organizations from concepts to methods, anyway. But first, a brief advertisement. Coming soon to bookstores, particularly online bookstores, everywhere, Design Rules Volume 2, How Technology Shapes Organizations, December 24th, 2024, Christmas. So it's a lovely number, 12, 24, 24. Very, very auspicious. And that's how it will look. That's the cover. And these are the spandrels of San Marco in Venice. And if you haven't read it, you should read Stephen Jay Gould and LeWan.
He's not in. Clark. It's only Baldwin.
It's only Baldwin, yes. Kim Clark went on to become a leader of the Mormon Church for the last 15 years. So I was abandoned. Yes, if you have not read Gould and Lewantin's Spandrels of San Marco, it's a wonderful essay, and it is all about materiality. I'll just say that and leave it to you to figure it out. So I have a lot to say, so don't try to take notes. I'm happy to share these slides if you want them on request. That's my email. I'm easy to find on the web. And let me go. There's a really spooky coincidence with Rodrigo's talk yesterday. In my youth, which was a long time ago, I was also brainwashed by NPV and especially by real options theory. Not to mention decision theory, and agency theory, which is basically the source of shareholder value maximization, the cause of many of the ills we're suffering today. There was an attempt, this was a movement from the 1970s through 2000 that attempted to impose an ideology of mechanical analysis, mathematical mechanical analysis on MBA students like me. Those students went on to become CEOs and boards of directors, and Rodrigo described some of that last night. And they wreaked havoc on the US and arguably the world economy. Perhaps, I think the world economy they may not have, but certainly the US economy is, and the politics that we live with have been very much affected by what Young Jin called the hollowing out of the middle class. But that's not my story today. That's just to say it was a spooky coincidence. I've been reading a lot lately in the ISIT literature, and there are a lot of proposals and claims in the literature regarding theories about technology. Okay, I'm going to say something. There is a progression of theories, but not much progress in theories, in my humble opinion. So let's start by thinking about theories in general. I propose there are 4 different types of theories: conceptual, predictive, that is testable, prescriptive, that is useful in some cases, and constructive. Constructive theories actually provide a recipe for making something new. Technologies themselves are constructive. They allow us to manipulate the natural world to make something that would not otherwise exist, that hopefully is useful not just to the maker, but to all of us. So think beef stew is a technology, clothes are a technology, cars are a technology, all constructive. The sequence, conceptual, predictive, prescriptive, and constructive, is a sequence. You have to go through it in that order. And it indicates different levels of power and progress in the theory itself. So what separates the last 3 categories from the conceptual theories is methods. So there are, in predictive, prescriptive, and constructive theories, there are methods that are shared by the community that ascribes to the theory. So methods unite the users, creating a community which has a common understanding. Sometimes that common understanding is called a paradigm. The community makes progress together as the methods deliver their results, and the community takes in the results and takes the next step. The ISIT theories I've read recently are very long on concepts and quite short on methods. Not that you don't have a lot of methods that you apply in the field, but the methods are not addressing the theory, or the theories are not theories with methods embedded in them. So hence my title. So I want to start with a recent paper which I like very much by Diane Bailey, Samer Faraj, Pamela Hines, Paul Leonardi, and Georg von Crow. Came out in Org Science in 2022. And it had the very provocative title, We Are All Theorists of Technology Now. A relational perspective on emerging technology and organizing. So I don't think you're all theorists. We are not all theorists. Anyway, but that's the theory. So the author's theory in a nutshell is as follows, and I really like the paper. They say technology is relational, and that as opposed to sociological or material or socio-material, relational is the next thing, the next new thing. Any non-trivial technology is best represented by its constitutive relations to its subsystems, and increasingly through its relations to external technologies. So they've discovered networks and ecosystems. Relational has replaced socio-material as the preferred, from what I can tell, the preferred conceptual framework. So fashions change because socio-material wasn't refuted. It's still basically a good theory, but the journals stopped being interested. You had to find something new to talk, or people had to find something new to talk about. Fashions change. So the relational, according to the authors, the relational perspective is based on the following concepts. Entities are enacted in relations. Relational functionality, so the relations have functions. Constellations of relations, and relational dynamics. And the authors lay this out. The author's claim is these concepts are sufficiently varied and expansive to capture the unit's levels of analysis and dynamics, capture all of that are essential components of a relational perspective. So if you have these four things, then you've got all you need from a theoretical point of view. And they illustrate the concepts by an analysis of the technology of apple production, which the authors understand very deeply, and I give them great praise for that. And that is a good place to start in all of your research, is with an understanding, a narrative about the technology you're studying, how it works. And apples are such a lovely example for this time of year in the United States. They're all over New England are apple orchards. I drive by one almost every day, and this is a wonderful time. So my critique, and every paper has holes, so this is a criticism, but not to take away from what the theory accomplishes. The theory is quite insular. Relational, as described by these authors, is grounded in metaphysics and sociology. Those are its academic roots. So they're not looking out into a lot of other fields or practice. The literature review, I would say, is broad, but it's not deep. They're not really looking at what the literature is saying. The relational perspective, and this is important. Brian Arthur says that the essence of technology is to capture a phenomenon. You have to capture it. And they say the relational perspective can be captured by these concepts. The relational perspective is not what needs to be captured. Technologies are the phenomenon that needs to be captured. And the relational perspective, if those are its concepts and they're not capturing technology, then they're incomplete. And I do think they're incomplete. And the authors talk a lot. They end up with new questions, new things, extensions. They do not propose methods, nor do they recognize the absence of methods as a shortcoming of the theory. The theory is summarized in a 2x2. Only thing worse than a 2x2 is a 3x3. And a 4x4 is just a 4x4, you just get rid of it. The authors look no further than they say, let's take this 2x2 out there into the world and confront the world with this 2x2. So my plan for today is to stick with Apple production, propose another set of concepts. Some are actually parallel to the ones proposed by these authors. And that's part of digging into your literature review, is saying they've got a different name than I have, so where does their name correspond to my name? But some others are left out, but needed, in my view. Some that are very near and dear to the hearts of those in this room, as I will show. Generativity, for example, isn't in that list. Neither is convexity, neither is, anyway, we'll get there. Insofar as there's time, I'm going to introduce the methods related to each concept. The methods are drawn from many academic fields as well as practice. And they are methods. So the concepts I will propose are value structure mapping using functional components. And this corresponds to what Bailey et al. Call entities enacted in relationships and relational functionality. They're absolutely parallel ideas. Task and transfer matrices and what I call structural paradigms, which is not a term you need to adapt. The method is task and transfer matrices. These correspond to those constellations of relations. In my view, a bit more concrete than constellation, but be that as it may. The spectrum of complementarity, which is a concept from economics, centripetal and centrifugal forces, and ecosystem dynamics. And these three things really are the concepts underlying what the authors called relational dynamics. And you really need to build up to the dynamics from the underlying theoretical components. You can't just wave your hands. So what's left out of the paper? First, options, modularity and platforms, not there. Recombinant systems, generativity, and layered modular architectures. Two very tightly related but not identical sets of concepts and methods that need to come in, I think, to understand apple production, not just apple orchards, but apple production. So let's go and look at that. Let's start with the technology. This is quoted from the article itself, and I bolded the main components: farmers, processing facilities, transport, brokers, cold storage. They leave some things out, and then they want to talk about the larger political system, state apple associations, academics, many in land grant cases, not a land grant college. Ohio State is, MIT is, and then the equipment suppliers, the pesticide suppliers, and the other suppliers of treatments, and then the U.S. government oversees quite a lot of things that bear on apple production. So method one is value structure mapping. If you want to know its origins, it's Ron Adner, 2017. 2023 has a value structure map of run flat tires, showing how the ecosystem really got in the way of the marketing and acceptance of run flat tires. So this is a value structure map of apple production taken from the narrative that I just showed you. You would have farms with land and trees, seasonal labor, processing plants, cold storage, transportation to large customers, transportation to brokers, and then they leave out a few kind of pretty important players because you have grocery stores out there, you have schools, you have restaurants, and you also have home kitchens. So the functional components are shown in boxes, as you can see. So those are the functional, the relationships are shown by linking symbols. and they link functional components. So the functional components do something. That's why, and they do something through the relationships. The relationships I've got here are sequence, the arrow, a box. That means the thing is essential to that component. You leave it out, you don't get that function. And the plus is the thing is optional. So that, and those are three things. You could develop more, but you could actually go a long way on these three linking ideas, these three relationships. The larger ecosystem, the producers we just saw, and then you have the suppliers, you need the equipment, you need the pesticides, you need the fuel, all of those are essential. And then the regulators, they're all optional. You can get rid of, you wouldn't necessarily have as good a world, but you would have apple production as we had in the Middle Ages with very little regulation. So those are optional. You draw the map according to the points you want to make. That's fine. You focus on things you want to talk about. So I'm going to ignore everything except the chain of production. But the authors, it is for other purposes extremely valuable and useful to be mapping the entire ecosystem. And so if you guys think about your research, you should think about the scope of your map. So these guys are not relevant to my particular argument today. The method is to convert the method here is to convert the verbal description, which they're everywhere, into components linked by symbols. So you're generalizing a verb. I don't know if AI could do this, but it would be a cute thing. You're putting a specific narrative into a general theoretical framework with operators. Those linking symbols are operators. So you have units of analysis and operators. The method is embarrassingly simple, but the payoff of making the map visible is huge. If you do read Design Rules 2, and it's supposed to be available open, the electronic version is, they promised me, going to be free. I'm not sure they're, anyway, I have to get on the case. But the payoff, all through Design Rules 2 are value structure maps. So I would say always do this, both the verbal description and the map. I'm working on a paper with a doctoral student at Imperial, and we did a value structure map of Adam Smith's pin factory and another of tailor shops. So we're working on that. The virtues of the value structure, let's see, there's a stray symbol that didn't get erased. The map highlights the complementarity between stages in a mathematically useful way. This is what happens in reality. These things go together. The map indicates sequence and distinguishes between essential and optional and functional components. And in design, I'm not going to do it today, but the maps can be translated into equations from which you can prove deductions based on formal assumptions. So the map is one step from a value structure equation. Furthermore, the equations can deal with uncertainty and optionality. So we're getting to Rodrigo's point about convexity, but they are also distribution free. You don't have to assume a probability distribution on any of the stages. That the probability distribution doesn't have to be known or in a particular family. So you've taken away all that mathematical complexity. Okay, method 2, task structure matrices. This, I think, the original idea was design structure matrices. That's due to Eppinger and his colleagues, but it was my paper in 2008 who said, yeah, you can map any technology using a task structure matrix. So down the main diagonal. So look at the farm. not in harvest time, but during the rest of the year. The farm down the road from me probably has 7 or 8 employees, but I've said 5. You can run a perfectly good farm with 5 people. So you have farmer 1, 2, 3, and 4. They each have, they perform tasks. And you put the tasks down the main diagonal, and then the transfers of material, energy, and information between the farmers, which are dictated by the tasks, those are the X's off the main diagonal. So the thing to notice about this task structure matrix, and this is true, multiple times a day, any farmer may need to transfer material, energy, or information to any other farmer. I don't actually work at the apple farm, which is I go to and contribute to the horse farm up the road. And I promise, this is from direct observation, multiple times a day, any of the people at the horse farm may need to transfer like a bale of hay or some energy or some information. Hey, the pasture gate is open, watch out, to another person at the farm. So it's an all-to-all task structure matrix, completely filled in. The TSM is densely interconnected all-to-all. The transfers often cycle, so somebody will give something to someone else, who'll give it to someone else, who will send it upstream. You can't predict in advance what the streams are going to be. Each day or hour may be different. This pattern of activity has a name in production theory. It's called a job shop. A job shop is a production unit that processes jobs, each of which requires processing at multiple workstations, multiple places in the farm, in any order which processing may vary in time taken at each workstation. Jobs in this context are bundles of tasks. Repairing the tractor, checking the trellises, this is the apple farm, mowing between trees, ordering bins, all of those are bundles of tasks that somebody executes in the course of making the farm work. Job shops are found in many, many, many industries. They're incredibly complicated entities if you look into them, but machine shops are job shops, restaurants and bakeries are job shops, apparel, tailors are job shops, services, doctors and dentists are job shops. They don't scale very well. So this is what I call a structural technological paradigm. Giovanni Dozzi invented the concept of a technological paradigm in 1982, but he said each industry basically might have its own paradigm, and so he distinguished between, say, autos and chemicals. What I want to say is, let's look underneath the industry structure at the task and transfer structure. And all job shops from all those industries just mentioned have densely interconnected task structure matrices like this. You know them when you see them. If you do the map and then you do the T&T matrix, you will see, oh, this has to be a job shop. Or this, there are other structural paradigms because in addition to job shops, there are flow production processes and platform systems with options, and for all I know, others. So this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, but it's meant to suggest that maybe the commonality of technological paradigms has to do with the structure of what Bailey et al. The structure of relationships rather than the identity of the industry. Flow production processes consist of a series of steps, step, 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 step. At the end, out pops a product or a service. All the steps are essential. So in Apple production, these are pictures of Apple processing lines. You don't see a lot of people, there are some in the background here, because this is automated flow production, automated and synchronized flow production. And you still have tasks, but in the process, in the flow process, it goes from task to task to task to task to task. There might be some guys on the edges putting out fires. Tasks may be performed by combinations of people and machines. So in an Apple processing plant, the people are basically troubleshooting. The machines are doing the tasks, and it's going from machine to machine to machine to machine in order, synchronized. The other big, these are the paradigms that have appeared to me as being very much worth talking about, but not exhaustive. Platform systems with options. In a platform system, there's a common core of functions, the platform, and a set of complementary options. The options have no value without the platform, and the platform generally has no value without any options. But its value does not depend on the presence of any particular option. So more options make the platform system more valuable. And this is a TSM for a platform system. It has design rules, which are set ex ante. It has optional modules, and it has system integration. And the size of these boxes varies. The design rules may be very small, not very determinative. System integration may be what the user does. I mean, these sizes are not meant to define the technology. So method 3, that was method 2, was task and transfer matrices. Method 3 is complements. I'm going to try to go over this quickly. Complementarity occurs, and this is due to Milgram and Roberts, and then it's very much in design rules too. Component A makes component B more valuable, better when used together than apart. Tasks in a job shop and steps in a flow process are strong complements. You take one away, take one of those elements away, the whole thing falls apart. Modules in a platform system are weak complements because, as we just said, each has value apart from the others. You can take any one away, and you have a functioning system. That's what it means to be optional. But there are degrees of complementarity, and strong versus weak determines the optimal form of organization. Clusters of tasks with strong complementarity, and the Bailey et al. Talk about constellations of relationships. What they should be looking for is a degree of complementarity in those constellations. So clusters of tasks with strong complementarity, as in a job shop or a flow process, reward unified governance. That is an integrated, hierarchically managed company to settle. Clusters of tasks with weak complementarity reward more loosely connected organizations because it's optional. And so you want to bring, Bill Joyce said it, not all smart people work for you. You want to set it up as a system with points of attachment and broadcast the interfaces and let other people contribute to your platform, because you gain and they gain because you're complements, but you're weak complements. So an ecosystem of companies or individuals. So this is just a little graph showing you super strong, weak, and none, complementarity, and then the preferred organizations, a unified firm, platform ecosystems, and independent firms. Now here's where, so Bailey et al. Talk about relational dynamics. It's taken me all this to get to dynamics. If you have complementarity, then you can have X controlling component A, Y controlling component B, X moves, then Y moves, then X moves, then Y moves. On some surface like this, the system gets more valuable on each iteration. This is called network effects, but it's a decentralized system. So these players may not even be aware of each other. They may not be, they each have incentives at their move to take it in the right direction and benefit the other party. So that's shown, the yellow arrows show the, it's decentralized progressive innovation. It's kind of what runs capitalist societies and runs them into trouble, maybe, the decentralization, because everybody's out for themselves. And to a point, it works. If you have network effects, it works. Let me pause here. And because I can take, let me take questions at the end. Okay? Because we're going to look at what they left out. Okay, so here's our annotation, the job shop at the top, flow production in the middle, and the other functional components I'm going to assert are all platforms. Cold storage is this group here. Cold storage, transportation, and food brokers. These are what I call logistical platforms. Grocery stores are what I call exchange platforms. Schools and restaurants are, for, in large measure, job shops. Okay. So all platform systems have the same value structure map as shown here. The platform, everything, it's essential, everything else is optional. Every option needs the platform. The platform is only valued for its options. The options can be subdivided, but I don't have room here. Now, 4 basic types of platforms, and this is true for physical or digital. And it causes enormous amounts of confusion because a product platform is what we see in information systems. It's a bunch of standards that allow you to have a bunch of components that work within the system. A logistical platform allows you to move stuff to many different places. So you can have many different sources, many different ends, and the logistical system, the logistical platform makes that system work. Exchange platforms, Rocher and Tirole took over the concept of product platforms since technology was invisible to them. And they said, oh, we're about markets. Well, markets are platforms. So we have 2-sided markets, we have 3-sided markets, we have n-sided markets. The original platform ecosystem people were livid. Totally, it was a total land grab. And yet that's the side of platform economics that has exploded, which is very ironic. But the key players there after Rocher and Tirole were Van Alstyne and Parker and Chaudhuri and Eisenman and then all the other people. Now, it's important, I think, it's important in design rules too, to distinguish in the exchange platforms between the transaction platforms and the communication platforms. And the essential question is the component in a transaction platform is the transaction itself, and it has 2 parties, a buyer and a seller. In a communication platform, there's a sender or receiver, and often the message sending, receiving part is free to both the sender and the receiver, but there's an advertiser there. There's someone who uses the data and benefits, and the platform gets paid as a result. So it's a 3-part thing. Standards, transportation, distribution networks, marketplaces, department stores, grocery stores, online retailers, communication, town criers, newspapers, magazines, postal service, Google search, maps, Gmail, Facebook, and Instagram. So these things are all the same in the sense that they are structurally platforms with options and ecosystems. But if you look into them, they're quite different from each other, and you can spend quite a lot of time in one place or another. The organizational mandate for all platforms is offer a lot of valuable options. The more, the better. So let's go in search of more options. The first place to look, so we've already talked about the standard design rule platform, where somebody posts a bunch of design rules and sets up some facility for system integration and invites everyone to come in. But that's limited. So let's now look at layered modular architectures. So between IBM System 360, which is the quintessential product platform, and Wintel, Apple, which are also quintessential product platforms, and today, what changed? Well, we have the internet and the World Wide Web. A new modular architecture. Critical year of transition was 1995. That's when the World Wide Web went commercial. And there was an explosion of, guess what? Websites. And among those websites, some were exchange, some were transaction platforms like Amazon, and some were communication platforms like Facebook. But they all, and Google, they were critically, the internet and the World Wide Web were open and not proprietary, and that was by design. Because the old business model was you own the standards. That was a position of strength, and you taxed the ecosystem. But the ecosystem was very happy because they wouldn't exist if you didn't have those standards. The internet and the World Wide Web were based on layered modular architectures. This permitted two-way information hiding. So the layers were hid information. Vertically. So the images are all like vertical. Like so the bottom layer hides information from the next layer, which hides from each hides from the layer above. And so you can stay within the layer and do a lot of different things. The design rules were open standards, and within the standards of a given layer, you were free to innovate. So new combinations were possible within and across layers. Combinations, also known as generativity, multiply the power of modularity. It's like modularity on steroids, because the information hiding is two ways, and you can, with good design, you can combine. The poster child of generativity is APIs. So I want to talk about them for a minute and then close. APIs and optionality. This is a new book. I just became aware of it a few weeks ago. And I had to wait to buy it. It wasn't available when I heard about it. It's by Steve Fishman and Matt McLarty. They are in the DevOps community. So DevOps is a very interesting community of practitioners, mainly, that is very, very related to what you all do. And I would strongly encourage building bridges to the DevOps community. So the subtitle is APIs, Optionality, and the Science of Happy Accidents. So Fishman and McLarty, and this was what spooked me out last night. They combined both my work and Taleb's Anti-Fragile. So in their chapter 3, you combine Baldwin with Taleb, and what do? You get small chunks of modular value, where, how, and why value is exchanged, and you offer those chunks of value to other parties at low cost. Sorry. So, and the options are where you get that nice convexity that Taleb talks about. So this is APIs, these guys claim, are the marriage of Baldwin and Taleb. But they trace the new era not, well, to the World Wide Web, but to something else in it. They trace APIs to something that's known as the Yegi rant. The Yegi rant, around 2002, Jeff Bezos sent a memo, according to Steve Yegi, who worked at Amazon and then went to work for Google and did a blog post. Around 2002, Jeff Bezos sent a memo to all Amazon employees, known in Amazon as the API mandate. The key quotes: all teams will henceforth expose their data and functionality through service interfaces. That was what they called APIs back in the day. There will be no other form of inter-process communication allowed. No backdoors whatsoever. This is very annoying to software developers who love creating little loops backward. All service interfaces, without exception, must be designed from the ground up to be externalizable. That is to say, the team must plan and design to be able to expose the interface to developers in the outside world. No exceptions. Anyone who doesn't do this will be fired. There it is. APIs can be, because of the API mandate, if you follow the API mandate, then the APIs can be combined and recombined. They become included in code written by others. Hence, they can migrate as options across different platforms. And that is amazing. So just to sum up, I've tried to show you a few methods which I think are promising for studying technological systems. Value structure maps, task and transfer matrices, complements and complementary dynamics, options obtained through modularity, and recombinant options obtained through standard interfaces. Go out and use them. These are methods, they're out there. They need to be developed further. They need to be applied. So I hope that in your research, as you take your papers forward and study AI, that you will think about these methods and see if there's an opportunity to use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Carliss. I think we have time for about 10 minutes for questions, comments.
And I know there was too much in this talk. I kept finding things I wanted to say to you all as a newcomer.
All right, Nick.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I particularly like the way you very kindly and gently criticized these ontological assertions. Folks who are saying, this is how it is, right? It's relational. Well, great. Now what can we do with that? So what you did is you offered us some methods and some language to be like, okay, so here's what you can do, as opposed to just this is. But my question would be, for what purpose? You gave us a bunch of methods. I think they're more precise than just saying everything's relational. Why? What is the goal? Optimizing an organizational form? In which case, the relational thing doesn't buy us anything, and that's the only question you can answer with this set of tools, right?
So the last Design Rules 2 is divided into two parts. The first, the chapter numbers kept changing, so I get them. But the first part is all about building blocks, including these methods. All of these methods basically go into the first 6 chapters. And then first 4 chapters. First 4 chapters are building blocks. The rest of the next up to 17 are applications. And the purpose of the applications has been to use these building blocks to explain first I'm not into org design in this, or I am into org design, but I want to explain it using data. I first wanted to explain, I was a student of Al Chandler's, so what can I use these sets of methods to explain the rise of modern industrial corporations of the Chandler type, vertically integrated, hierarchically managed, big firms? Because there was a big surprise in the 80s with the rise of platforms and with digital platforms, that all these legacy companies, I have a slide that shows the transition in market value from physical big corporations to platform companies, and it is dramatic. And that needs, why did it happen? Why did the big industrials arise in the 19th and early 20th century, and why were they dominant through, say, 1980? And then suddenly we have this new paradigm, and the old companies didn't make the transition. They didn't know what to do. The rules were all different. Jeff Bezos and all the the internet native managers had a totally different concept of what you needed to do than the managers of GM and GE and so trying to explain first where the modern corporations came from, and then why they were unable to make the transition to the digital economy. It's because if you put these rules together and start analyzing value capture, not just value creation is important, but value capture, you can derive propositions. Among the propositions is a synchronized flow production process is, in technical language, it's the opposite of the nice convex function that Taleb talked about and that Rodrigo talked about. It's a concave function, and it's it's your short and extreme put option. And you can show that. And you can derive from that the fact that managers of these flow production systems are going to be extremely controlling, because the only thing you can do is shrink the uncertainty at every interface to its minimum. So they're going to be passionate about finding bottlenecks, and they're going to be very, very risk averse, because risk is what makes convexity valuable. Concavity makes risk aversion valuable. So that's an example of using these methods in a structured way. You can say, well, these guys are going to be full of control freaks, and these guys are going to be let the good times roll. And by the way, in a company that has to do both, which these big companies do, the guys who run those data centers are very different types of managers from the guys who set up the new markets and the ecosystems. So the ecosystem manager. So that was a long answer to a very good question.
All right, Ola?
Yeah, thank you so much for this very inspiring talk. So one of the things, I was very fascinated by, in your book, was really the relationship between the task structure matrix and the design structure, because you didn't mention that now, because that was also something we saw in the automotive industry back in the days, in a sense, how actually the product was reflected in the way that the company organized too, as well. But in relation to that, something I haven't figured out, and I wanted to hear your take, is really what happens when one of those components actually become programmable, because it programmable. So tasks are not assigned to components, beforehand. You can actually reprogram. So it's really agnostic in a sense. And you can see then that you both have a physical component that perhaps have a task that is, it got assigned at the time of production. But you have other parts, software running on that component, for instance, that actually can be reprogrammed by anyone, after, especially through APIs, actually by any actor.
Yeah.
So what does it mean that a component can be agnostic in that sense? And
It means it makes the system more flexible. The search for flexibility in the auto industry goes back a long, long time, because Henry Ford built a special purpose machine for each step in the Model T, and then he put the machines together in such a way that you couldn't take one out, and they were too tightly fit. It was a disaster. It worked fine. It got the cost down, but then he saturated the market, and people wanted different kinds of cars. And so GM came as Ford's main competitor, and Ford was dominant in the early 20s, and GM was struggling. Alfred P. Sloan hired a guy named William Knudsen from Ford to come to GM and run Chevy, the biggest division of Ford. And the first thing Knudsen did was he said, we only use general purpose machine tools for every step, because we need to be able to change what they do. Now, they couldn't change them as easily. The Toyota comes in, because to change what a machine tool does, you need a die. You change the die. It became customary in the US auto industry with GM in particular. Changing a die might take half a day. Toyota came along, and they said, well, we can work on this. Not by making the die programmable, but by organizing the workforce to make them really good at changing dies. And so the goal became SMED, single minute exchange of die. And Toyota achieved single minute exchange of die without reprogramming anything. So it's the same thing. The programming makes the ability to simply replace what are a lot of mechanical interfaces with an act. Yeah. So I hope that. I hope that answers.
Absolutely.
Do we have time for
Yeah, well, let's do one more.
Okay, sorry. So Carliss, thank you so much. That was really interesting. And in fact, your new book's going to be Nick's stocking stuffer for Christmas this year. It's very, very cool. I was just curious, as you were talking about the example, the Apple example, and the 5 or 6 different ways in which one could sort of theorize, as you put it, it reminded me of it felt like there was this amalgamation of ideas from operations research and sort of this, on the other hand, systems analysis and design, right? So OR for the last 60, 70 years has sort of, for better or worse, focused on these 7 or 8 classes of problems, right? For process-oriented, task-oriented, the job shop problem being one of them, right?
The job shop being one of them.
Yes. And on the other hand, there's this rich systems analysis and design literature, right? So for people, process technology. And it looked like a lot of your concepts were trying to integrate those two perspectives.
Bingo.
And especially, as you mentioned, convexity and concavity at the end, too, it sort of brought that to bear. So I was sort of curious, is that sort of what was that an inspiration, or did that just happen to work out that way? Because I know you're borrowing from other theories.
It was my education. It was
Okay.
my strange path. I started out in finance, doing real options. I went to Harvard Business School, and they taught me decision theory and NPV. No, I'd learned that before, but and sort of structured analysis of decisions. So I don't believe much decision theory, but there's a lot of decision theory underlying these methods. But I also fell in love with manufacturing. Manufacturing policy was my favorite course. I'd taken some OR as an undergrad, some operations research as an undergraduate, loved it. And the simplex method was fabulous. And then I got into my work with Kim on modularity, which was a phenomenon. It was a phenomenon we could observe, saying, why this, why now, why is everybody talking about it, and what is it? And I said, well, it's got to be an option, obviously. And so we got it as a portfolio of options. And that options are all about what's concave, what's convex. Every trader on Wall Street who does dynamic hedging, now that is very automated. But they're all about what's your convexity, what's the convexity of the surface of your position. So yeah, just one thing led to another. I fell in love with design theory when I wrote, when we wrote Design Rules 1. And it was so obviously about design, and people like Christopher Alexander were great inspirations. And he created modules too. He did modules before anybody. Anyway, so yes, all those threads are there.
Well, Carliss, thank you so much. You have so many things for us to think about. We look at the industrial, economy, and our AIS field has been writing about how that era has to move to digital era, and I feel like we still do not have a decisive theory that can replace Porter's sort of like his theory of value chain and 5 forces that really constellation of Chandler's era of work. I think your theory and method gives us a lot to work with, and I look forward to reading your book along with all others. So please join me one more time thanking Carliss.